COVID-19 infections under control in China, people are traveling domestically during the National Day holiday. How much of a boost will it give the economy? Fighting broke out again between Armenia and Azerbaijan. What's behind the new conflict in the decades-old dispute? And this week's newsmaker. Now, Dialogue Weekend.
Welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Qinduo. Hundreds of millions of Chinese are on the move again for the National Day break after the COVID-19 was largely brought under control. The 8-day National Day holiday, which coincides with the Mid-Autumn Festival, is set for spending boom. The tourism sector, still reeling from the COVID-19 epidemic, is eyeing a big rebound. The service industry as a whole was hit especially hard by the coronavirus outbreak. Whether there's a strong boost from the pent-up domestic consumption will be closely watched during the holiday. To talk more about China's holiday economy, we have Professor Li Jinzhao from Beijing Foreign Studies University, and from Shanghai, Dr. Jun Ge, CEO of Two Joy Holdings. So welcome to our show, Professor Jin and Dr. Jun Ge. So here we have this number, like, the official prediction is 550 million trips will be made during this National Day break over there. And then the Ctrip, the largest online service industry agency, saying that that's 600 million trips will be made during this 8-day national holiday. So Dr. Jun Ge, what's your sense of how large is the Chinese domestic tourism market?
Yes, definitely the travel has bounced back. And if you look at the data, as you just mentioned, Ctrip projected that the travels during the holiday will reach 600 million. And according to China's Ministry of Tourism and Culture, it is expected that 550 million people will travel. And the market is huge, and definitely you see in the last 2 days the travel has already reached 200 million, and I think this number as projected will easily be reached very soon. The good news is that almost 100% of the holiday attractions and accommodations are open for business, and the spending, as far as I know, has already reached about 90% of the last year's level. So this is remarkable in such a poor situation. Now, the mere fact that so many Chinese travel speaks that people's consumption confidence has increased, and the people's confidence in terms of their job security has increased, and that will certainly create a long-lasting effect for the months to come.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Li, you are nodding your head, while
yes.
Jun Ge was speaking. So how do you compare this year's, tourism, the pent-up consumption? Of course, last year that's a normal situation.
Yeah.
And then what's your observation of any changes or any special features for this year?
Yeah, this year is really catching up with the last year, but we're still not matching up to last year, because last year was the 70th anniversary of the founding of People's Republic of China. So the celebration of last year was even bigger than previous years. So according to statistics, last year there were 800 million trips made. So now the prediction for this year is from 500 million to 600 million in total. So we're still a little bit short as compared to last year. But considering the number in the May Day holiday, the National Day holiday, together with Mid-Autumn Festival holiday, really witnessing this exponential hike, exponential peak in tourism boom.
Well, Jun Ge, you mentioned about the confidence. That's a key word, for people to observe the recovery or strong recovery of this tourism industry here. Confidence, you mentioned in jobs, in people's prospect of their livelihood, but also confidence, from the government side. You see, they have eased the restriction of tourist site for their capacity to host the customers, from 50% to 70%, basically the increase of the capacity to accommodate the number of tourists. And also, nationwide, there's basically all cities are marked as low-risk cities, areas. So do you see the confidence, that kind of confidence also playing a very important role in boosting, strong growth of the number of trips?
Definitely, I think the government has played a strong role in terms of economic resumption. And if you look at the statistics, in fact, there are still some uncertainties there regarding, whether economy will be fully recovered in the months to come. If you look at the second quarter's data released not too long ago, about the accommodation and the dining industry, actually it contracted about 18% of the decrease compared to the last year's. As such, government definitely wants to promote consumption and create a friendly environment to people for them to travel safely and put measures in place. But all in all, China's economy definitely will be seeing a great growth. If you look at the overall GDP growth, the first quarter was bad, but the second quarter has picked up, and the third quarter definitely will be again on a growing track. So this is the good news for the Chinese economy. And I think people would have to understand that for the economy to sustain, there will be a lot of other measures to be put in place. And especially, business, if you are in the entrepreneurial world, you have to think about how to innovate, how to create new consumption patterns, and make your business attractive to the consumers.
Mm-hmm. Well, this from the government and the private, the market, obviously, they're working together closely. But also, let's stick on this, factor a little bit longer. For example, the confidence. Not only the government. The government is confident that the virus is fully under control. It's safe to travel for the people. And of course, from the individual point of view, Professor Lee, if you say are planning to travel to another city, do you have any concern in terms of safety, in terms of the virus there?
Yeah, I think on the one hand we have these 500 to 600 million people on the road doing sightseeing. On the other hand, most of these travelers are still traveling with their mask on, and they are still taking all the necessary cautions. And actually, they are taking this as a little break before possibly the second comeback of the pandemic when the weather is getting colder. So I think, they have been, the majority of Chinese netizens have been paying very close attention to what the experts, the national experts, are saying and predicting about this coming winter, together with this new season of flu. So I think people have this, they share this mentality that let's give ourselves a break. Let us relax.
Yeah.
While the weather is still warm enough, while we have this long holiday. But we are ready. We are bracing up if the second round is back in winter or till next spring.
Yeah.
So I think people are being ready, are getting ready in both ways.
But also, of course, the strong record of the Chinese, efforts to contain the virus, obviously, give people the confidence that things will be under control. It's
Definitely.
safe to travel around the country.
Yeah, I think the majority of Chinese people are confident that even the pandemic is coming back, it will be under control, it will be regional, probably a little city or a remote area or isolated areas. But they are confident that it will not be nationwide. it will not be expensive.
Okay, so Junke, over there you mentioned about the overall economy. I mean, the tourism obviously part of the service industry is important to the country. Recent figure shows that the weaker growth, but it's starting to grow, to come back. In addition to this manufacturing sector, with the box office, with probably catering businesses are also coming back. So are you confident that the service industry is coming back, and also China can rely on the service industry or consumption to further boost the economic growth, and the theory of dual circulation?
Yes, I have strong confidence over the government measures and certainly the economic environment the government has been trying to create, which will be welcomed by the global businesses as well as domestic consumers. Now, if you look at the consumption pattern, people's consumption, after the pandemic actually has created certain new habits. People like to, put safety and flexibility as a priority in terms of their consumption. And if you look at the patterns, many people actually now travel by rental cars, and they also start to develop a new kind of consumption patterns, using, say, for example, private airlines to travel. People put safety in place, and the government certainly also created a good environment for the economy to grow. Now, I come from the entrepreneur world, and if you look at the entrepreneurs, they are also getting ready to kind of work hard and work smartly in the last quarter of the year to make sure that they can compensate what had been lost in the first 3 quarters.
Well, that sounds very encouraging, scenes and development in the Chinese domestic industry. Well, many thanks to Junke and Professor Li. Let's move on to the recent conflict in Central Asia. Armenia and Azerbaijan have long been at loggerheads over the mountainous region of Nagorno-Karabakh. A new round of clashes broke out last week along with the contact line of the area. Fighting between majority Muslim Azerbaijan and Christian Armenia could draw in regional players, Russia and Turkey, for example, with both sides blaming the other for the flare-up. World leaders have urged calm as fears rise of a full-scale conflict. For better understanding of the conflict, I'm joined by Serkan Aral, a political analyst and writer from Istanbul, and Mark Slaboda, Moscow-based international affairs and security analyst. Welcome to our show, gentlemen. So deadly fighting has erupted in recent days, as I said, in the mountainous region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Despite the international calls for ceasefire, but there are yet signs of calming down. So I will start with Serkan here. How likely is a further rise of tension or even full-scale conflict?
Yes, Turkey sees that 20% of Azerbaijan territory, including Upper Karabakh, still remains under illegal occupation of Armenian forces for 3 decades, and peaceful solution has not established last 30 years. On September 27th, the Armenian forces attacked to Azerbaijan site, provocation says Azerbaijan site, and some civilian settlements already target. The last situation now, it seems that Azerbaijan forces are going on strategical points like Fuzuli and Cebrail, the south part of Karabakh. And this is important that at 93 Armenian forces captured, and if they cut off this road, then from Armenian capital Yerevan to Karabakh, the peak mountain will be held and the roads will be held. But we can say that there are 4 UN Security Council and 2 UN General Assembly resolutions, as well as decisions made by international organizations that the demand is withdrawal of the occupational Armenian forces from Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 other regions of Azerbaijan, of course. But the facts and figures says now 25,000 refugee Azeri Turks will return back to their homes from last week today. Turkey's role is important because Turkey says Azerbaijan is a red line for Turks, but Turkish soldiers are not on the ground. I can mention that few commanders are at Baku, that is all. But Turkey's position, Turkey says, Turkey will do what is required if Azerbaijan wants to resolve this conflict on the ground.
Okay, we'll touch upon the role of Turkey and other powers in the region a little bit later. But let's take a look at the peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan have been held since 1994 when a ceasefire was reached. But there have been, occasional minor clashes along the borders. So why are the two countries all of a sudden on the brink of war? Why this time around? What's important about the timing, Mark?
Okay, well, as our Turkish colleague...
Bottom, please, yeah. Okay. Mark, go ahead, yeah.
As our Turkish colleague pointed out, the 1994 ceasefire, which was only that, it was a ceasefire. There was no more firm commitment, and Baku has never agreed to not settle the Nagorno-Karabakh issue by force. It was in favor of Armenia, and there was a line of contact established deep in Azerbaijan territory. 7 Azerbaijani regions, not only Nagorno-Karabakh, but 7 other regions, have since been occupied by Armenian forces. And of course, Azerbaijan regards this as a violation of international law, a seizure of their territory, and the dialogue for the last 26 years hasn't achieved them anything within the Minsk format. That is coupled with the fact that Azerbaijan has had a huge military buildup in the last couple of decades, fueled by oil and gas wealth. Azerbaijan's military budget for the last few years has been larger than Armenia's entire budget. So they feel that the military balance has shifted to a very significant degree in their favor, that they believe they can solve this issue by force instead of dialogue. And the third is the imposition of itself by the Erdogan regime in Turkey. Turkey has created a series of conflicts across, to destabilize the entire region, from Libya, Cyprus, Greece, Syria, Iraq, and is now injecting itself into the Caucasus. This is the 3rd geopolitical conflict it currently has with Russia: Libya, Syria, and now Azerbaijan. And it is attempting to inject itself into the Caucasus in a bid to transcend from a regional power to a great power at the expense of Russia's regional influence. Russia has had good diplomatic relations with Armenia and Azerbaijan both.
Serkan Aral, Armenia also has accused Turkey, which backs Azerbaijan, as you said, of meddling in the conflict. Do you think Turkey is behind the conflict?
No, Turkish position is so clear. Turkey is supporting Azerbaijan and providing Azerbaijan with military support of a kind never seen before this conflict. But let me make it clear with my colleague. He mentioned about Ankara's position. Ankara is not interested in opening another front against Russia in this region, but Turkey is still, doing in the same path with Russia in Idlib area. But if you look to the Libya, the Libyan government invited Turkey to help to Sarraj government, and also before we saw the same military action in Qatar against Saudi Arabia and others. So the Minsk group calls for a ceasefire, but this is unacceptable from Turkey's side, because if they are really seeking a solution, then the Armenian forces should withdraw all the territories that they occupied. That is important. And if we see the Azerbaijan President Aliyev says that the war will not end until the Azerbaijan regains full control over these territories. But just not Turkey, the support coming to Azerbaijan. You can see the Israel supporting, providing weapons and intelligence to Azerbaijan. It's not only the Turkic nation support, but Azerbaijan has a border to Iran, and also Azerbaijan is among Israel's top suppliers of oil. So this is mostly some Armenian propaganda that Turkey is going to involve to the position. This is not true, but you know, they are targeting the joint energy and transport projects conducted by Baku and Ankara. So are they sending an invitation to Turkey to be part of the conflict? We can ask about this.
Well, looking ahead, Mark, how do you see, of course, with the involvement, for example, not only the two countries, but also some other regional or powers out of this region? So what's the prospect of resolving it peacefully or achieving a ceasefire, or even to another round, another direction, for example, full-scale war? How likely it is?
Well, of course, pretty much the entire international community, except, of course, for Turkey and Azerbaijan, have called for a ceasefire and an end to hostilities. The Erdogan regime seems to be goading this conflict on. As our previous colleague said, the Turkish government finds a ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan to be unacceptable to Ankara, which is a little unusual to say the least. I'm not quite sure who is in charge of Azerbaijan, whether it's President Aliyev or whether it's the Sultan of Turkey, Erdogan. The problems with a ceasefire is that it'll be very difficult with Turkey driving this conflict on. They've given Azerbaijan their full support. They find the status quo unacceptable, which is understandable for a number of reasons. But of course, this is weighed against the self-determination of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, also known by the actual inhabitants as Artsakh, which do not want to be part of Azerbaijan and have lived largely apart from at least the last 30 years and for much of their problematic history. A diplomatic solution really is the only solution that really is acceptable, at least to the outside world, because in order for the Azerbaijani dictatorship to take full control of Nagorno-Karabakh would involve ethnic cleansing and genocide, which of course brings up the specter of the Turkish genocide of Armenians earlier in the last century, and with Turkey interjecting itself in such a forceful and belligerent way into this conflict that is making Yerevan extremely uncomfortable.
Mark and Surikin. So let's leave it there for now and then take a look at this week's Newsmaker. Professor Lee, Lamu, tell us who is Lamu, and what do we know is like her ex-husband poured her with gasoline and set her on fire, and she was killed very tragically. And what has led to her death?
I believe she is from Sichuan, and she is from Aba, autonomous region of Tibetan and the Jiang minority groups, and she met and fell in love and married her ex-husband when she was in her late teens. So they knew each other And then they married. The marriage lasted for about 15 years, and then her husband showed a lot of abusive manners, a lot of abusive patterns against her for a long time. But their main dispute was over the 2 children, and her husband did not really carry any serious job. And so they filed for divorce, and they divorced. Then they remarried again. So the second divorce was in June of this year. And after divorce, both kids were sentenced to her husband because she couldn't bear this abusive relationship. And then one day, as she was making her vlog, her ex-husband came to where she was living. She actually moved back to stay with her father. Her mother passed away, and her mother was alive. Her mother actually was protecting her a lot more. But after her mother passed away, she was on her own, and so she was set on fire, and she was severely burnt on the 14th of September, and then 15 days later, she passed away. So it was a heart-wrenching tragedy.
It is indeed.
And it went viral on Chinese social media. It really caught people's attention, and a lot of discussion on how to protect the women from violence.
But as far as I know, like there is a law, anti-domestic violence law.
Yes.
But is that law not enough, not powerful enough, or not biting enough to protect people like Lamu from being abused, or being hated by their partner or their husbands or wives over there?
Well, this year marks the 4th year, the 4th anniversary of the implementation of this newly issued law, the national law, which is the anti-domestic violence law. And we can see immense progress already made after the implementation of this law. For one thing, more and more Chinese are realizing that domestic issue is not just a family issue, it is actually a social issue. And domestic violence is not just the personal matters, but social problems.
Also legal issue.
Yeah, it is legal issue, and the perpetrators will be sentenced, will pay due consequence for their misbehavior and their misconduct and even their crime. But I have to say, it takes a long time, a much longer time, to really implement this law. At one level, we have to be very specific, because it's one thing to have the law passed, but it's the other thing to actually to be able to specifically implement. We still need very, very specific definition and very specific procedures in terms of, like, when a domestic violence issue pops up, then which Chinese government, which agency is responsible for placing the arrest, and how to, because normally domestic violence issues involves multiple sides. It involves doctors, social workers, legal personnel, and also law enforcement forces. So they need to really to collaborate in a very powerful way.
We have 1 minute left here, less than 1 minute. Briefly, what is missing here to protect Lamu from being hurt by her ex-husband? And he, looking back, he should have been stopped from even accessing her because of his own record, poor record.
Yeah, after their divorce, we can see that even after divorce, divorced women are not safe enough from their exes. So this is more than a domestic violence issue. This is already a crime, a criminal act. So I think he will.
Well, with that, we are coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Jinduo. You can find me on Twitter. Thank you for your time. See you next week.